Alright guys, I thought I'd take some time here and try to go over this main shaft with you. It's I'll do my best to try to describe it and how it functions. My basic fundamentals of trannies was a crash course by my father, and I'm going to try to describe it in the same way he described it to me. As I tell you, it made a lot of sense to me after he described it, and I understood how it worked from there on, especially after I rebuilt my first tranny. It made a lot of sense to me, and I always went back to that basic fundamental steps that he showed me. This shaft there's actually two shafts here. You got your input shaft, as you can see that's separate, and this is your output shaft. Your input shaft has your fourth gear. It also works as your main drive gear for your counter shaft. And this is your output shaft. This is all one shaft here, and then the rest of your gears are on that. Come down here for a minute. As you can see, this really big gear. We're going to leave fifth gear out of the equation on this one because I'm just going to work with what I got on hand. So you see this really big gear? This is first gear. When you go down from there, you come down to second gear, third gear, and then fourth gear. How does this work? And how do you shift gears, and what takes place when you do shift the gears? There's a lot of things that take place, but the main thing, the main heart of this tranny that has to work in order for this tranny to work correctly without tearing it up is your synchros. Okay, you got your sliders, and you got your synchro rings, and we'll go inside there in a minute. But I want to show you your sliders. This part of your synchro ring is connected to your output shaft. So this is always spinning at the same speed as your output shaft. When this is engaged, your output shaft is engaged. And hence, everything else is free float. Everything else free floats except for your synchro block setups. They're part of the shaft. They're splined onto the shaft. So this has to engage somewhere before your output shaft to start spinning. So if you take a look at this, here's your counter shaft, which will mate up with this shaft. And as long as your input shaft is spinning, the rest of your main drive gears are spinning, but they're just idling. They're just sitting there spinning. Your output shaft isn't spinning. Because like I said, all these gears are free floating until they're engaged. And that leads us to the next step. If you're sitting there idling in your driveway, you start your car up in the morning, for some reason, we're going to start with fourth gear, your main drive gear on this tranny. For some reason you want to put in fourth gear. I'm only doing that just for demonstration purposes. You want to put it in fourth gear. So what's going to take place? Alright, you're sitting there idle and your clutch is engaged. Therefore your input shaft is spinning. Okay. Now if your synchro rings weren't there, let me show you something. Let me take the synchro ring out. Hope I don't blow this thing apart. It's just going to grind. Essentially that's going to be what happens if you have a synchro problem. There's no way you're going to get it in, and if you do, you're going to tear something up. So that's where the synchros come into play. Your synchro rings, you take notice here, not sure how good you can see it, but they're tapered on the inside. And they're only brass, they're soft metal. That way these wear before the main hard parts wear. These are cheaper than the hard parts. And something has to wear eventually. Especially if you introduce an abrasive to the tranny like dirt, in this case. It's gonna wear down much faster. It's gonna act like sandpaper in the tranny, and use your imagination what's gonna happen at that point. Stuff's gonna get wore out. But the reason why these are tapered, there's a reason. As you can see, it's a cone shaped on the inside. It's got teeth on it. Starts at a smaller diameter at the bottom and gets bigger inside diameter. Let me show you why. Let me take this input shaft back out. I don't know how good you can see that there. This is actually cone shaped as well. Now this is the part I want you guys to remember. If I teach you guys anything, I hope this sticks with you. Your synchro ring is pretty much a brake. Remember that. The synchro pretty much acts like a brake. And this is why. You got your input shaft that's spinning. And you got these two tapered. You got your tapered ring. And you got your tapered shaft. And it's spinning. As soon as I start adding pressure, it stops spinning. It's putting brakes. It's actually applying the brakes to your input shaft. Now let me show you why and how. So let's go over this synchro block a little bit. I'll go over this more once I get it apart deeper. But for now, I'll try to give you a basic understanding of it. Hope you can see that. Well, you got your slider, your synchro, your sleeve. You got your hub, which the sleeve is on. Then you got your inserts. And then you got your insert retaining spring. There's one on each side. And they just hold pressure out on those inserts. So it's an insert retaining clip, your inserts, your hub, then your sleeve. Take notice when I slide up on this. I gotta be careful while this is apart because it can fall apart if I go too far in either direction. See, when I slide up on this, it takes those inserts and it's pushing them up. Well, remember that braking theory that I told you? Well, those inserts are what are pushing up on that synchro sleeve. Now you got a basic idea on how that works and the parts involved. Let's reinstall the input shaft. Take a look at this. I'm just going to show you how it slows down the shaft right now on this one. The problem is that there's a lot of resistance when you shift these into gear, and if I go a little bit too far, I'm going to end up popping my synchro blocks apart. So I'm not going to put that one all the way in gear. I'll come down to second gear and show you there, because I got other stuff that'll stop me from going too far in that gear. But for right now, I'll just show you how, if you're sitting there idling, or if these two shafts are spinning at two different speeds, they're essentially, as soon as I start putting pressure to that, you'll see that shaft stop. It gets everything spinning the same speed, whether that be stopped or 3,000 RPMs or whatever it may be. It's the whole principle is to get everything going the same speed. That way it'll slide in. So let me come down to first and second gear and see if I can give you a clearer picture down there. Okay, so now we're down here at first and second gear synchro block. The sliders, everything's in a neutral position. See first gear sitting there spinning freely, second gear sitting there spinning freely. Your clutch is engaged, you're sitting there idling. So your main drive gear, which is also fourth gear on this, is spinning your counter shaft. Therefore it's spinning second gear or first gear and second gear at two different speeds because they're two different ratios. You disengage the clutch, but you're still sitting still, but all this stuff is still spinning inside your tranny. So as soon as you pull back on your shifter handle, it pushes down on that synchro ring, applies the brakes, and so now you're in first gear. Like I said, the synchro hub is splined onto the output shaft. So now first gear is essentially locked in. Use your imagination here, guys. This thing's spinning in first gear. Second gear is still up here spinning along because it's riding that counter shaft at two different ratios. So your speeds are totally different. So if you want to shift this in the second gear without this synchro sleeve being there, it's going to be spinning at two different speeds and do the same thing as I showed you before up top. So okay, so it's sitting there, it's spinning. These things, it's spinning at 2 different speeds. You push in the clutch, disengages it, and bam, applies the brake, lines it up, gets everything spinning at the same speed, and goes right in for you. So let's take a close look at that in slower motion. You're sitting there spinning. It applies the brake, stops it, gives it spinning at the same speed, and allows them to slide in together. So that Synchro Ring is essentially a brake. I hope that makes sense to you guys, and like always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to cover it more as I go. But that's why it's a good idea to always make sure those Synchro Rings are in good shape. I don't know if you can see how these ones they come to a point. That actually allows the gears to kind of ramp up on each other if they're just slightly misaligned. Because as you see, they don't always line up. So it actually helps them, works like a ramp and engages everything. You want to make sure they have a nice point to them. Make sure they're not flattened out. That way it has that nice ramp action. Same thing on your Synchros. You're going to want to make sure the braking action on the Synchros, there's a clearance. I got to look that up. Make sure you have a certain amount of clearance in there so it's applying the braking action to it. And that's pretty much all there is to it. If you come up here and take a look at these Synchros for 3rd and 4th. Right here is the shot at the 3rd gear Synchro. As you can see, they're flattened out, they're misaligned. And there's a reason for that. And I'll cover that when I tear it down. Alright, so here it is once again. Your gears are spinning use your imagination. This one's spinning. You were just in 1st gear, so you're going down the road, so your rear end spinning, which is spinning your drive shaft, which is spinning your output shaft at a totally different speed than 2nd gear. So this comes up, applies the brakes, gets everything spinning at the same speed, and bam, slides in. Well, I hope that makes sense to you guys. Like I said, I'm not the best teacher. I can show you how to do it and how I do it, but I also like to show you how it works. So at least maybe you got a basic idea and the understanding of Synchros. If someone mentions them to you, you can say, yeah, I know how they work, and give them a little education, you know. Let's move on to the next step.